Coming up on Network Africa. United Nations says at least 676 people killed in Sudan clashes. Sudan's warring sides trade blame over church attack that injured 5 people. Kenyan President William Ruto apologizes over cult's deaths, vows to take responsibility. Hello and welcome to Network Africa on Channels Television. I'm Anne Nwawadu. United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says at least 776 people have been killed due to clashes between the Sudanese Army and the Rapid Support Forces. The office said the clashes have also injured 576 others. According to the report, the long-term war in Sudan has now forced close of millions of people to flee their homes, with most of them displaced within the country. Since the clashes broke out in mid-April, residents of the Sudanese capital Khartoum have been suffering from severe food shortages, especially after dozens of factories were looted and burned. According to the United Nations, it's estimated that about 15.8 million Sudanese, or about 1/3 of Sudan's population, will need humanitarian aid this year, and the figure is likely to increase as a result of the war. Meanwhile, airstrikes and artillery pounded Khartoum after Sudan's warring army and rapid support forces paramilitary also failed to agree to a ceasefire despite committing to protect civilians and allow humanitarian access. Representatives from the two warring parties signed an agreement in Saudi port city of Jeddah just last week to protect civilians and ensure humanitarian assistance, while the two sides stressed it was not a ceasefire, but a declaration of commitment to protect the civilian of Sudan. The conflict has paralyzed Sudan's economy, strangled its trade, aggravating a ballooning humanitarian crisis, and the UN is saying that 200,000 people have now fled into neighboring states.
Our commitment is not to the partial successive humanitarian truces. This is, in fact, a particular model being built up in this particular occasion in order to soften the engagement with a lengthy humanitarian or ceasefire. So, of course, the Sudanese armed forces are not launching an offensive. They are actually making a defensive. This is why they will not open fire only if they have been attacked. And this is why from time to time there will be a kind of what apparently may be as a breach of the ceasefire. But actually this is not meant. And this is actually not the case which is currently being on. There is actually a kind of trying to operationalize the center of the town. And as much as those rebellious regiments who took refuge into heavily inhabited areas, and they confiscated houses, they are there, and this is why the army would not attack them, definitely, in order to lessen the loss of civilians.
Sudanese officials have met with delegates of UN agencies to discuss crisis management and aid assistance after a month of fighting caused the humanitarian situation to deteriorate. Sudanese Finance Minister Jibril Ibrahim said he discussed in the meeting with Special Representative in Sudan, Volker Perthes, on several issues, including water shortage. The meeting took place in Port Sudan, where large numbers of Sudanese were recently residing after fleeing the war-ridden capital. The conflict has triggered a humanitarian crisis that threatens to draw in outside powers and destabilize the region. The Sudan Armed Forces have accused the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces of attacking worshippers in the church in Umdurman, and the city adjacent to the capital Khartoum. A Coptic Christian activist and 5 people were injured in the incident, including a priest. The army, in a statement, claimed the RSF shot at worshippers in the blessed church of Umdurman and against international humanitarian law and established customs. But RSF denied that it had attacked the church and instead accused an extremist group aligned with the Sudan Army as of being behind that attack. The force also accused the SAF of assassinating an official of a football federation, Amir Hasbullah, and other killings in that capital. But earlier, the SAF had accused the RSF of attacking 2 hospitals in Khartoum, urging the international community to recognize the group as a terrorist organization. In the meantime, Sudan's Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has issued a directive to freeze the bank accounts of the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF group, at its affiliated companies. In a number of decrees, General Burhan said that 4 military officers linked to the group were involved. General Burhan also sacked several central bank governor Hussein Yahya Jankol and appointed Borai El-Sadiq in his place. However, he did not provide a reason for Mr. Jankol's sacking. Let's now join Mariama Diallo, VOA Africa's correspondent. Hello, Mariama. It's good to see you again, and Happy New Week.
Thank you, Anne, for having me once again. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Let's begin with an update on the current situation in Sudan as we speak.
I actually should change that, but instead of saying I'm excited to be here, but I'm just sad every time that we are here discussing. That means the conflict is continuing. Obviously, it's been a month since this conflict started. It started back, on April 15th. And the most recent agreement that was signed, the commitment agreement that was signed in Jeddah, has not really translated into either a ceasefire or an improvement of conditions. Obviously, fighting has been reported in places like Khartoum, not just there, but also in Omdurman and also, I think, in Bahri. Another place that people have not been talking about a lot is also another one in West Darfur, in Jenaina, where the refugee the Norwegian Refugee Council actually said that the conditions, the intense fighting, the violence that's happening in that part of Sudan has just been unbearable for residents over there.
And we understand that the Sudanese armed forces and the RSF have failed again to agree to a ceasefire despite the declaration of commitment. So how is their commitment to protect civilians and allow humanitarian aid panning out? And how possible is that if they do not agree to a ceasefire?
Well, that's a great question, because as we've seen it since the conflict started, basically there has been a lot of ceasefires, but they come and go, and they haven't been able to hold. So for this latest commitment, basically what we're going to see is that what I'm afraid of is is it going to be the same thing that was happening to the ceasefires? Yes, they agreed to it. Yes, they say they're going to respect it, but at the end of the day, we don't see it. A few days go by, and fighting continues. So it will be very, very interesting to see, because of these negotiations having been taking place in Jeddah for over a week and still going on. It will be certainly interesting to see how are they going to hold it, how are they going to monitor it, and how are they going to make sure that whatever they say, whatever they agree to is going to happen, because basically nothing can happen. There are no improvements in sight, if agreements are not respected. So I guess we will find out in the coming days to see what the developments will be.
Mariama, speak to us about the humanitarian situation in Sudan. Are there aid movements in and out of the country? Hospitals are being overwhelmed, but what is the update as we speak?
Well, I think for that one, I'm actually going to come back to that western part of Darfur, in the town of Janina, where the Norwegian Refugee Council basically is saying that out of there are basically an estimated of 100,000 people that are internally displaced. They are displaced, but they are still, the violence still is intense in that part of the region. So what they're saying that is that they said that they are still unable, basically talking about aid. I'm just looking at my notes here to make sure that I get everything right. That basically they're unable to deliver emergency in Khartoum, not just in Khartoum, but also in that western part of Darfur. What they're saying, it's the new thing that we think about just the fighting, but for them, this new thing that they talked about is basically they talk about shutdown of the banking system and that they are not able to also get visas actually being issued to get into the country, and that is really hindering their work. I mean, they still have people on the ground, obviously, just having all kinds of challenges to continue their work. But you know, if they can't get into the country, that's also challenging. I think another aid agency, I think it's the World Food Program, today that said that they did start delivering some foods in this other parts of, I think it's southern part of Khartoum. It's in Gezira State. So they started delivering some stuff today. So I think, you know, aid agencies are working in and out, trying to figure out how to, you know, just basically you know, like kind of face the challenges while they're trying to do their best. So that's what we have at this point.
But are there regions in the country where the fightings and clashes are less intense? I mean, are there places that this is happening? And are people able to go about their daily activities in those regions?
I think it's been very hard to actually, you know, verify those places because the information changes as we go. I think the places, if there are places that have less fighting, what's happening is what you see is that the residents are going to try to go there, and I'm sure the aid agencies also try to be in those places to try to help. But at this point, it's very hard to kind of, you know, the lines. It's hard to get people even on the ground to talk to you. The lines are still a problem, but I think if they exist, I'm sure they do, and that's what the people, you know, like that place where the World Food Program is delivering food is a place where a lot of the people from Khartoum have actually moved into so they can get help.
All right, thank you very much, Mariama Diallo, VOA's Africa correspondent. Thanks for your time, always on Network Africa.
Thank you, Anne, for having me.
To other stories, Kenyan President William Ruto has apologized to Kenyans over the Christian Doomsday death, admitting laxity and complacency over the government side. More than 200 bodies have so far been exhumed in the coastal Sakola forest, where congregants were allegedly forced to starve to death in order to meet Jesus. More than 600 people are still missing. Mr. Ruto blamed the country's police and intelligence officials for failing to discover the cult activities on time. He says the concerned officials would have to give an account of the mass killings. The president said they will do everything in his power to prevent future religious deaths. He also promised to visit the Sakola forest once investigations were completed. Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he spoke to South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and asked him to help implement Kiev's peace plan to end the war with Russia. Mr. Zelensky made the remark in a video address from Rome just one day after Mr. Ramaphosa spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin. South Africa has positioned itself as neutral in the conflict. Meanwhile, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has said there is extraordinary pressure on the country to abandon its non-allied position on the war in Ukraine. In a weekly newsletter, Mr. Ramaphosa said that South Africa will not take sides in what he says was in effect a contest between Russia and the West. His comments are coming days after the U.S. ambassador to South Africa, Ruben Brigetti, accused the country of secretly providing arms and ammunition to Russia despite its professed neutrality. Mr. Brigetti said the U.S. intelligence was very confident that they had loaded onto a Russian ship at a naval base in Cape Town in December. But Mr. Ramaphosa has agreed to investigate the claim, but he says there is no concrete evidence to support such allegations. In the meantime, U.S. allegations over South Africa's involvement with Russia have heaped pressure on the rand, already weighed down by concerns over power crisis. The currency struck an all-time low just last week. Before regaining some ground, it remained at its weakest in 3 years. South African officials earlier hit back at U.S. accusations that the Russian ship had collected weapons from a naval base near Cape Town last year, December. And more investors fear it could lead Washington to impose sanctions. Alexandra Forbes, investment economic analyst, Kansia Fika, said that electricity supply problems had been weighing the currency down, and the row over the country's stance in Russia had worsened the outlook.
South Africa is not short of drama, right? So the rand plummeted quite significantly beyond 19 rand 40 at some point. And, you know, it's really the own goals that a government has kind of put into play. We've seen that already. What was weighing on the currency was the grey listing earlier. We saw that load shedding as a continued or ongoing factor on weighing the currency down. But also now our still not clear stance on where we sit in terms of our Russia-US relationship, which has actually, in fact, worsened the outlook. We should be benefiting from the disinflation that's going on around the world, but clearly these are more domestic factors weighing more on the currency outlook currently. It's quite a tall ask, right, if you have this relationship with the Russians, to say, friend, you are in a predicament, I'm going to just excuse myself to make it easy for you, right? But I don't think that's how politics play out. And as things are going, we may need to be forced to pick a side. And when that comes, I think, and I hope that, you know, it is a side that is economically beneficial to the country.
The Nigerian Consulate General in Johannesburg, South Africa, is reaching out to Nigerians back home to provide family information on a Nigerian woman who was rescued from many years of living on the streets. Madame Asabe, who says she is a trained educator, claims that she was brought to South Africa 12 years ago by a church group but lost touch with the group at some point. She joins a growing list of distressed Nigerians who have been living rough with no clue how to retrace their steps and return home.
She walked with difficulty into the living room owing to the wound on her foot. But her face lit up when she sighted the Nigerian flag.
They will see this. They will see the picture.
We spoke with Madame Asabe, who, according to her passport details, is 49 years old, trying to establish her background, family, and how she got to South Africa.
I went to College of Education, Zaria. Then I went to University of Abuja. I found Babalechi, a pastor. Oh, but this day, they call me this. If not all these things, Babalechi will come. He will carry me. Where is he now? He's the one that found me.
For the 40 minutes we spent speaking with Madame Asabe, she was consistent about how she came to South Africa through a church. Not quite coherent when asked about her family, but she claims that she's from Suleja, has a brother called Aliyu, a set of twins in his care, and would love to return to Nigeria. We cannot confirm all this information, but she also says that the church through which she came to South Africa has now been sold.
I went there. I wanted to tell the man to make arrangement for us to go back. They say you have to come back to Nigeria. They have sold the church to Tosin. Baba Tosin.
The consular officer at Nigeria's Consulate General in Johannesburg, Christopher Ogueri, has been following up Madam Asabe's case, taking her in and out of hospital. He says the task is not just to get her fit and back home, but knowing to whom to hand her.
We have the plans of, after the treatment, to make sure that she's okay. We are planning to take her back to Nigeria. Now, we are pleading to Nigerians, those that know her, because we don't have any contact of her family in Nigeria. And we can't just take her back without handing her over to somebody responsible in Nigeria. So we are pleading to Nigerians to help us contact her family so that we can have a contact of when we are repatriating her, we'll have somebody to hand her over to.
According to Mr. Ogueri, Madam Asabe is at the moment admitted to the Helen Joseph Hospital in Johannesburg, where the big wound on her foot is being tended to alongside her mental health care. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
The Nigerian Institute for International Affairs hosted the 17th Ambassador of Ireland to Nigeria, Ambassador Peter Ryan, over the weekend. This served to help attendees at the Ambassadorial Forum learn more about Ireland's internal and foreign policy. The ambassador, who pointed out that Nigeria and Ireland have had relations since Nigeria's independence in 1960, spoke about the collaborations between both countries.
As we marked Europe Day, we were honoured to be joined by the Nigerian Ministers of Health, Foreign Affairs and Women's Affairs, reflecting, I hope, the important partnership with the EU. You won't need me to tell you that the EU is the largest trade and investment partner of Nigeria. It's the largest country that Nigeria has a trade surplus with, and there's a very close relationship between the European Union and Nigeria. We have an Africa strategy, and a key part of that strategy is that the EU, we will influence the EU to make them even more ambitious in the strategy towards Africa and Nigeria in particular. We've enhanced our engagement across the region, and to advance the collaboration on topics of interest to our African partners. We've just opened our new mission in Senegal. Professor referred earlier to the meeting between our presidents. They met just on the day that we had opened our new embassy in Senegal. We've opened an embassy in Morocco. In fact, we've opened 25 new embassies around the world in the last 3 years. So it's the largest single expansion of our network.
And finally, on Network Africa, Nigerian chef Hilda Effiong Bassi, popularly known as Hilda Bassi, has surpassed the current Guinness World Record holder of 87 hours 45 minutes, set by Indian chef Lata Tondon in 2019 after cooking non-stop for more than 90 hours. Hilda, who has become a national sensation, has been in the kitchen for the past 4 days and has made over 100 different dishes since turning on her cooker. She is allowed one assistant at a time and can take a 5-minute break each hour, or the equivalent over several hours. Her aim is to break a Guinness World Record for the longest cooking marathon by an individual, which she tagged Cookathon. Her attempt has captivated the country, with politicians, celebrities and fans stopping by to cheer her on. And of those that have visited the venue to show their support for Hilda, as Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, she also received a call from Nigeria's Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. However, Guinness World Record says that it is reviewing the evidence before saying if she has broken the record. I'll be hearing for that record to get broken very soon. But thank you very much for watching Network Africa. That's it on the show. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Stay safe.